Have you ever been in a situation where people, a place, something triggers an emotion within you? It could be a word, a sound, a song that evokes anger or even sadness, deep sadness, and you just don't know where it is, where it's coming from. Even if it doesn't make sense to you consciously, could there be something subconsciously happening within you that you may not even remember? Well, fortunately, today in the classroom, we have a mind body medicine and recall healing expert, Dr. Michelle LaMasa-Dawson. And so today we're going to dive deep. As you know, I love taking out our soul shovel and we're going to dig deep because it's the beginning of the year. Everybody has these commitments, resolutions that we really want to achieve. And so the only way we can do that is if we dig and dig, because Dr. Michelle LaMasa-Dawson is going to help us find freedom from discovering forgotten wounds.
And when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here waiting for you.
Hi, my name is Lillian McDermott, and I am a certified life coach, a certified holistic cancer coach, and the host of the classroom. If this is the first time that you are tuning in, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide natural ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening and viewing friend, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. Well, as I said before, so many things are happening in our body, our mind, our spirit that we have no clue what's happening. And to help us unravel these clues, and let me tell you, when I say clues, she finds clues and puzzle pieces wherever I can even find them. She is like a hound dog of puzzle pieces and finding these truths that you can dig, and all of a sudden they make sense. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am so grateful that Dr. Michelle LaMasa-Dawson is here to do just that. Welcome. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So happy to
Yay.
be here. Woohoo!
Yes, I know. I know.
Always so happy. And to start off the year with you is amazing. I love that.
And I know that when I was preparing for this class today, I could not believe it had been a year since you've been in the classroom. And the reason why is that I air your classes so much because there's so many people wanting to learn these new truths. And so since it's been a year, let's start from the very beginning. Share a little bit about your background and what got you so interested in being like this detective of the unknown and finding these fears and emotions that have let stay dormant in our body. So share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So it's just wonderful to be here. And my journey began a long time ago with my mom, and she had been super traumatized being in, different adoption agencies and foster homes before she was 2 years old. And that kind of set her up to be depressed. But also, we know that in the ACE form of like early childhood trauma, it can set a person up for a lot of physical ailments. So I saw my mom going to these doctors, and then they would give her, some medicine, but she never felt any better, and she really wanted to choose death by suicide for 60 years of her life. And we went on a workshop together, and Gilbert asked her one question, and we, talked about like, what do you want to do with your future? And that kind of transformed her. She went back to college and she found some meaning. And so that was first. And then my Auntie Mary had a breast cancer. And then we found German New Medicine and total biology, recall healing, and that it just sparked my passion. And I went to school with to first to get a degree in psychology. However, once I was in the psychology classes, I loved it, but I knew so many people, including myself, where that theory really didn't equate to some differences in my life. And so that kind of transformed and then started doing recall healing and found Saybrook and a PhD in mind body medicine and everything that from their curriculum. I was just super excited. And that really, started so long ago when I was, when I was a youngster and so that really started me on my round.
So, with everything that you've done, it is amazing that you've dug deeper and deeper and how they've all interconnected with one another. You had mentioned Joubert, but you had not mentioned who Joubert is. Can you explain who Joubert is?
Sure. Gilbert is my mentor. He's the founder of Recall Healing. His last name is Renault, and he's a doctor and he was a naturopath and he learned about German New Medicine and total biology and he trained with Dr. Sabah. And I was just fortunate because my cousin's husband is a doctor and he was looking for somebody to help with my Auntie Mary's cancer. And they went to a workshop that Gilbert was there. They met. He invited him to San Diego, and my cousin was like, "Oh my gosh, you have to come." And as soon as I was in the classroom, I knew, "Oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. I want to be gum on his shoe, and I want to learn every story, everything that he does so that I can do the same."
Well, and I think that you've been beyond gum on a shoe. You have really gone beyond it and learned so many different modalities that complement what you learned with him as well. So, I mean, you're like a Swiss Army knife of finding all these different connections that I would have never even thought of. And so, with that in mind, let's talk about why it is that many of us go through life with these traumas that are trapped in our bodies or traumas that we don't even remember that are affecting our life. So what would you say is the cause, first of all? And second, what we can do, and I guess the rest of the time, what we can do to unravel it and find and discover these lost wounds or forgotten wounds.
Well, that is a dissertation in itself.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
It definitely is. So, simply the way that I teach people is that whatever comes up in your daily life where you feel fired up or like you were saying, sad or, especially those kinds of feelings, the
Hmm.
happy and joyful ones also repeat.
Hmm.
But the ones that, or we have a really big dislike about something and we're not really sure where it came from, we can start with our own timeline and we can just simply divide our age in half, think of the circumstances that may be bothering us. We use the body, the biology to help us to understand. So if you have symptoms, that is an invitation to dive in to understand, wait a minute, those symptoms don't just appear. Our brain is literally helping us like a turbo function to allow us to have the consciousness. And we've all been taught, don't talk about your things. Don't air your dirty laundry. Be a big girl. Be a big boy. Don't cry. And so all of those things get brushed under. And then when there's shame involved in any kind of story, nobody really wants to talk about it. It's embarrassing. So we just want to move on and forget about it. And so I'll hear people all the time say, well, that was in your past. And it's not in your past because it continues to show up in your daily life. And so when we have zero understanding about, maybe a behavior that we did or we acted completely out of character,
Hmm.
that is a really big invitation to tell us, you know what? This may belong to mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, great grandma and grandpa. And so you begin to see these patterns when you look at the big picture. So we look at it as Gilbert says, it is like a puzzle, and we are looking for the puzzle pieces.
Well, you are the puzzler. I don't know. You know where to find these pieces and in a way that's so instinctive. And so I know that I have instincts too, but I would never have thought of putting together, the repetition, I like what happens before we leave home and then repeating that those years, like if you leave the home at 19 or 20, let's say, every 20 years, there's that risk of repetition unless we actually look into it and kind of solve it within ourselves. Is that an actual depiction of what happens? I know it's
It,
deeper than that, but
Well, but that's a really nice way to say, if there's something that really is hard that you don't want to repeat, and you think back about those events that have happened in your life
Mhm.
that were really painful, and you really would never want to repeat them again, and you can still feel it as if it's yesterday. That is an invitation. So that's what I usually will say. It's an invitation. Whatever is showing up in our life that, makes us feel any way that is not at peace, that is an invitation.
And I was having this conversation with a friend just last night. And I was saying to them that I was asked to speak at a workshop where they wanted me to talk about holistic cancer options, right? And yes, I could have talked about the body, but where I spent most of my time was talking about the emotional, the traumas, the things that we don't look at. And so she says, "Well, I don't believe that at all. I cannot believe that at all. You're telling me that everybody that has had cancer or has died or has had traumas, everybody has traumas. That means everybody is going to have cancer or everybody's going to have these kind of diseases." And what I said to her, and I don't know if maybe we can elaborate on this a little bit so that we can really, sit and all of us think about why wouldn't we want to dive in? So I said, here's the exception. Here's the difference between if you can recall something as if it happened yesterday and it happened 20 years ago, you're not done. But if you can look at something that was harmful to you and you've worked with it and you've dealt with it and you have to deal with it again and again because you get deeper and deeper into the layers of what happened and you're willing to forgive and to embrace and to love yourself and to release the shame, then that is not going to be a reason why you would get sick. It would be, and they could not embrace that philosophy. They could not embrace it. And I said, listen, I'm not trying to convince you. I am just trying to share how I've 13 years of coaching and 13 years of doing the classroom, have now almost 14, how this new awareness has changed my life, how it's changed my life. So can you go explain this a little easier or deeper or wherever it is that we can go with it?
Well, first, I would say that it's really sad when people don't see that the mind and body are really connected.
Mm.
That when you have secretly suffered, especially when you secretly suffer. So we say in our work, name it, claim it so that you can dump it. And like you said, Lily, you have to go back through several times sometimes. And even like when you read a book and you're in one place and then you read that book a few years later and you're in a completely different place,
Hmm.
you may end up revisiting certain things,
Yeah.
especially the ones that are quite big. And so the goal is so that they don't show up. And the body is, the divine, God has made our body so amazing that it's kind of like, we say that we're like a rocket, we're psyche, automatic brain, and body, and that everything we experience in our life is processed through our psyche. And so just like our ancestors that were literally trying to find food and shelter, clothing, connection, we're no different. And so when we have traumas, literal or symbolic trauma, and trauma can mean war, but it most of the time it's the stress of our daily life, the day in, day out, living with an alcoholic, living with parents that have to work all the time and the kids are there. That's still trauma for a young person. And so we spin in our mind, and then the automatic brain says, this might, this is kind of a threat to your existence. You need a turbo function, particularly if you're not at peace and you haven't found that processing. So then it will drop it into the body the way that the person is feeling to help. And we say turbo. So nobody would think of a cancer as a turbo, something that's positive. But if you think of your body, what it's actually doing to help you through that trauma, through that challenge, through that pain, through that anger, through that hurt, whatever it may be, that makes it easier to understand. And I recently saw some research that is so beautiful. It was actually a reel based on the research, and they had taken several people and they started looking at through live blood analysis, and they would do, different kinds of emotions. And they saw that the way that the blood was, it was actually moving through the body, that the way that the blood would move through the body based on a person. So if there's joy and love, then the blood cells would start to sparkle and they would be so beautiful. And then they looked at anxiety, okay? And they saw that the blood started clumping together as if to like help that person, through that big issue that they're going through. And they looked at a person that had cancer or some kind of illness, and their blood looked very similar to that of the anxiety. So it was really showing, but that when you have love and joy, it's almost like your blood cells are dancing and they're shimmering with light. It's so beautiful. So I thought that that might be a good way to,
Yeah, and they do it. That happens with water too.
uh-huh,
It
for
happens
sure.
with plants. I mean, they've done this experiment in so many different ways, but yet we do not understand. You know, and the conversation was about DNA. It was that people get sick because of their DNA. And I said that kind of victim mentality has left the building a long time ago. Even allopathic doctors know that, disease this lifestyle. However, they know that people are not going to change their lifestyle. So now it's okay, take this pill, take this pill. And it really doesn't solve the problem because the body is still trying to release it.
Mhm.
And when you were saying something about the fact that we may that the body that whenever something happens, the body is trying to reveal things to us and trying to help us. But at the time, let's say maybe 20 years ago, I could only handle this much of that. And that was what my body exposed to me. And then as I get older, maybe 20 years down the road, I can handle a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's no different than when you read the Bible. When you first read a particular scripture, and maybe 10 years later, or 5 years later, or even the following year, you read that same scripture, and it means something different every time. And that the body does um, try to get us to see. But what if a person refuses to look at a symptom as the body speaking to us, and they refuse to make a connection to a past trauma, or maybe they don't even know it was a past trauma? What is your advice to someone to kind of like be curious about, could this be could this be your body speaking to you? Could you have a forgotten wound that you just don't even know it's there? What are some of the steps to discovering the potential wound that is there.
Well, like you said, you do have to have some kind of awareness that there's more to the story.
Mhm.
And so, the older I get, the less I know.
Yeah.
That's really,
Yeah.
really has been profoundly, especially in this last 5 years, as we know, it's like been just all of these things that I thought I knew, but I have been completely different. So we say change the perspective and you change everything.
Hmm.
And so looking at things as you get into a different place, and what was coming to me is that when you're in the middle of really hard times, your body is in a fight mode. You're in a fight mode. So of course you can't do your work when you're in the middle of that. So as you get removed from that and looking back or something happens and then you kind of remember, oh yeah, there was that and that and that and those were really hard times and you simply just give it honor, then it can create a new space
Hmm.
and something different to show up. And so I just invite people and I tell people, don't believe me because that so many
Hmm.
people, just
Yeah.
don't believe me. It's totally okay. You can just see what happens if you start to apply these tools, looking at your life. What happened at half your age? It's no big deal. Just tell me what happened. Tell me
Hmm.
what happened at half your age, and then based on, what they're experiencing, I might ask them a very specific question related to that to help foster that. Because when you ask the question, then it brings in the intuition, the spark. I'll be talking to someone and I'll ask them a question. And at first, usually our brain will want to shut us down. And it's a really important point because denial is really not a choice. It's the way that people survive. And so it works for a time, but it doesn't serve us well at some point when we're still experiencing that same pain and trauma. And so when we kind of look at it from a different place, it allows something different to show up. And then we can also transform our body and at a cellular level. And, just as a point, you had mentioned about genetics and DNA. So, oh, my ancestors had this. Well, if you look at it, my ancestors had this and they had this type of trauma. All of them had a similar experience. So that in my life, I experienced a similar kind of issue or trauma, and that same feeling comes up, the brain might say, wait, in my ancestral patterns and the things, we use this as a means to help us. So we might use this again. So the goal is to keep those cells, those genetic expressions turned off and honor what our ancestors have experienced and also what we have experienced. And rather than just shoving it under the carpet, honor it.
So would you say, and I love that, I love honoring the past because and you know that I've worked with Dr. Bradley Nelson. We've done events together and it's been amazing. It's been amazing to see some of the generational traumas that have been around for generations and generations and generations. And when I realized this, and when I started looking at my own life, and what are some of the traumas that I've maybe inherited, even, they're not even mine to carry. Even if I were to just be curious about it, and maybe let's say I didn't believe it, because one of the things I shared with my friend was, listen, I was you 15 years ago. I was you 14 years ago. I didn't believe this stuff. It was I made fun of people like me. I don't need to convince anybody. But when somebody's time has come, you just can't unhear something. You can't unlearn something. You can't unsee something. So if you are curious enough, maybe that it's being presented to you, be curious. Why? Why is it happening? And it wasn't until I didn't even thought of, that some ancestor could have given me, maybe they had such deep shame that was handed to through my DNA, that need to be negative or shame or all of that. And why not look at it and say, instead of being shameful to look at some of these things in our past, to be curious and say, ah, how can I unravel this gift, this present that maybe wasn't meant for me, but I am carrying it?
Mhm.
How can I give it back? How can I claim it, name it, like you said, and dump it?
Mhm. Well, also, if it was a severe issue, okay, shame or guilt or whatever it may be, and there's secrets about it, that imprints into the genealogy, and that's what
Mm.
gets handed down. And then those similar situations, crazy enough, they actually show up in our own life. And we think it's just us, but it's never just us. So we have something called the small property that really honors that. So we say, I was a small property ravaged by the storm. And so it means that I was a little baby that was brought into a world of unfinished business for all of
Mm,
my ancestors and my parents and grandparents. And today the fine weather has returned. It's not my job to continue to carry that, but I give honor to you for what you have done. And I also am releasing myself from having to carry that. So we say the forest and river have become calm. The forest are our ancestors, and the river is our mama. The house is vibrant and shines in the sun. The house is our body, and it shines under the divine light. And the sun is also symbolic of our earthly father. The field is returning to its order, health, and beauty. The field is our body, and it's going back to the normal mode of operating. It was a turbo function to help me get through these really big crises and that of my ancestors. So thank you to all these symptoms or whatever is showing up in my body right now or in my life, not always a symptom, but in my life. And thank you to myself for doing my healing work. And it's something simple, but it's for the brain.
it's a beautiful poem. Who wrote that poem? Is there a
Dr.
poem or?
Dr. Sabah created it,
Okay, Dr.
and
Sabah. Okay.
Dr. Sabah, and he would tell people do it 3 times in the morning. Well, 10 times, 10 times in the morning, 10 times in the afternoon, and 10 times in the evening. So 3 times a
Whoa,
day
30
until
times a
your brain,
day?
yeah, until your brain really like holds that. And I'll never forget the time where I was like in it and I realized, wait a minute. Is this mine? This is what I've heard my mom say and do all of my life. I was a small property that was ravaged by that storm. But let me give it back to my ancestors and give them gratitude for what they experienced. And let me heal that so that it doesn't have to continue. So then I'll say, I release my children and my grandchildren from this pain and this suffering. And it's a big motivator when you have family that you would, especially children and grandchildren, it's like you don't want them to
No,
experience
you
a
don't.
third of what you experienced in your life. And yet, that you see them and whatever is going on in my kid's life, I always kind of, okay, wait a minute. Does this belong to them? Does this belong to me?
Sometimes we want to jump in and solve our children's problems and issues when we refuse to look at our own. And it's so much easier to look at the speck in somebody's eye and refuse to look at the plank within us. And so it can continue on if we don't stop it now. I know that it's a new year and many people have ambitions to create and achieve. And every year they have this really excitement at the beginning of the year, only to dwindle. But that's a pattern too. That's a pattern. So, what are some of the things that we can look at in our life to say, hey, just look at it as a pattern. And what is that pattern telling you? Or look at that symptom that you have right now. What is your body trying to tell you? Is that what you do? Is that how, or is there more of a process of finding the wounds, finding kind of like naming it, claiming it, naming it, and releasing it? What are some of those steps that people can take today so that they can set themselves up for a very successful year, 2025?
So It's a great question. And the first thing that comes to mind is a prayer that served me so well through, especially when you want something different, and yet that same thing continues to show up over and over and over again. It means that something has to shift, and it begins with us. The alternative is to stay in that place and repeat it over and over again. And that's not any fun, and it's equally painful. And so, where I know sometimes that it's challenging and that I might need to, I call it my growing edge. Okay, because it's not easy. I don't really want to do it. Yet I know for my own goodness and that of my family that I need to take one step. And so I will pray, and I'll just pray for the willingness to be willing to do what I need to do. And sometimes that just may be taking a sip of water because I haven't been drinking enough water. Or sometimes I'll have this, this little seed in my heart that, that I've wanted to create. Last year, I've actually known for quite some time that I'm supposed to be writing books and different papers and all my stories people love, and so I had it in my mind, an old secret belief, even though I've written two theses and one dissertation and many different PowerPoints and things like that. Yet in my mind there was still this piece of, you're not a good writer, because I heard it. You're not a good writer. And so last year, I was invited to be a part of a book. And so it's just a chapter, but it was enough. And then a girlfriend had this writing workshop that it was only me that showed up. And it was so beautiful because I got this one-on-one time with her. And I started writing. And I started writing creatively with the way that I speak and the way that I tell stories. And it turned out so beautifully. And I realized that, and it was a 10-year anniversary. 2014, I finished my dissertation. 2024, I finished my first chapter. And so that will end up being a book. But I knew. And yet I was so drawn back. I had that secret belief. There was still devaluation that would show up from time to time. So these are all the things that don't serve me well and are not necessarily true. And so just a little bit at a time. And so when I started writing, I found that I had so much to share. And then my girlfriend gave me a couple of tips of just like using your senses. And then this whole story just came alive. And so that's what I would say. It is like that, that you pray for the willingness to be willing. When it's time, it will happen as you take steps. And if it's not time yet, give yourself a break and see what is a space to be able to just do one thing that you have kind of wanted to start doing.
Hmm. So
One day
the
at a time. Sorry. One day at a time, 1 second at a time sometimes. Take a breath and go for it.
so the saying is the willingness to be willing to do the things I need to do, or what is it that you
That's
said? I
what I
want you to
say.
repeat
That's
that.
what that's my prayer
That's your
of
prayer. Okay.
my prayer. I'll just say, Father, I'm just praying for the willingness to be willing to do what I need to do in this moment. And that kind of takes me out of that defensive mode, like I don't want to, or that little girl, or the rebellious teenager that it was like, no, I'm not doing it. Yet I know that there is something really beautiful. And, through great pain comes great transformation. And so that's what I like to tell my clients, that right now you might be in a lot of pain, yet just one day at a time, before you know it, things are going to be very different for you.
Yes, it is. And if somebody is listening to this right now, whether it's on podcast or social media or wherever it is, it's so important to know that you're listening to it for a reason. and that
Mhm.
this was intended just for you. It was intended for me. It was intended for Dr. Michelle to kind of like spark something within us, all of us, because there are so many times where we just ignore. We ignore how we feel. We've been taught to ignore ourselves. We've been taught to put others first, and although that's important, not at the detriment of who I am. It's to acknowledge that I am worthy, but I am not better than you, and you're not better than me. And so those are the things that, gosh, that was something that my dad used to always say to us. You're not better, nobody's better than you, but you're not better than anyone else. And that is something that I've taken with me. But then when you have teachers along the way, like I had a teacher say to me that I cannot write. And I have this book that I have been wanting to write. And then I get to this place where I just stop. And perhaps maybe that's a belief I need to unravel within myself. And that's what I mean with all of us. All of us, at this point, if you are listening to this, perhaps you too need to just be curious about, okay, what is it that I need to listen to? And I'm going to ask Dr. Michelle to kind of maybe put us through an exercise or something before I just want to share about my website and some of the things that you can be a part of as we begin this year to start the process of making 2025 the best year of your life. And why not make every year the best year of your life and every year improve upon what you even thought you were capable of? So go to whenyouneedafriend.com. Please subscribe to the website. Also, as you know, censorship is truly on the rise. I've had more than 80 classes removed, and from YouTube and Facebook. And so YouTube is the worst, though. That's the one that keeps deleting stuff from 2017, like it was okay then, but not okay now. And so I just want to encourage you to join us in BitChute so that if something is said along the way, that will be removed and broadcast through Facebook and all the other social medias, but it will be aired in its entirety in BitChute. So please, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to BitChute. That way you can hear the class in its entirety without any apologies or any censorship. So also I want you to go check out my sponsors, support my sponsors, support them the way that they're supporting the classroom. Go to my Shop Now bag or check out my workshops from the past, that maybe it's a do-it-yourself. You can take advantage of that in 2025, as well as check out my Shop Now bag, which has all these products that are Lilly approved. These are from, increasing your faith all the way to decreasing pain and management without any medications. And so just start your year with doing something different and new. Like Dr. Michelle says, be willing, the willingness to be willing. And so pray for that. And then last but not least, you can become an enrolled student in the classroom, whether it's $1 or $1,000 a month or a one-time donation of your time, your talent, your treasure. All of it is needed to continue this mission that has been planted in my heart. As I mentioned before, I totally believe, like many people today, that our body we were victims of our DNA. And it is not true. And I've been blessed with so many teachers in the classroom, including Dr. Michelle LaMasa-Dawson, that you can find her at soultreetransformations.com. And I know that you have events coming up pretty soon. So would you like to share any of those, Dr. Michelle?
Sure. I have some workshops coming up. In fact, this week I have a workshop and it's relationships.
Yay!
And so is very good. And then I have a toolbox workshop in person in March in California.
Wow.
And so you would be you'll be learning tools that deepen your journey, help you have insights. We do some exercises to kind of pull out some of those those traumas so that we can become freer. And
Mm.
so I love that. And then yeah, so all year long. And then in September, I will be starting a new institute. So if there's any people that, kind of want to add something to help them, increase their success with their own clients and patients, it's a really neat way to be able to have that happen.
Awesome. That's awesome. And once again, you can find her at soultreetransformations.com. I love Dr. Michelle, and I am so grateful for the day we met because it's not only promoted a beautiful friendship, but a different kind of healing. A different kind of healing that, sometimes we don't even think is possible. And especially during times where we feel there's no purpose for this. There's absolutely a lot of purpose for everything that we go through. And one of my favorite scripture quotes comes from Genesis 50:20, which is which is when Joseph said to his brothers that had sold him into slavery, what you intended for harm, God intended for good. And I know that God ultimately is in control and that we need to look at everything. If it's harmful and it's harmed us, that we need to look at that there's a beautiful purpose for it. And it's our job to look at it. And so how can people start with that willingness to be willing?
Well, I also, when you were talking about Genesis, it reminded me of the something that I learned in my 20s of God writes straight with crooked lines.
Mm,
So no path is straight in this lifetime. Our life is filled with peaks and valleys, and sometimes we're in a valley and sometimes we're on the peak. It's never all good and it's never all bad. And so when we can get into that gratitude about whatever it is, and especially when it's hard, in the Bible, it totally talks about giving gratitude, giving thanks for every single thing. And I just, when I started looking at things like that, it pierced my heart. It really helped me to kind of look at things differently. And so, whatever that is, and especially, I'm reminded that I never thought that my oldest son and my relationship would be any different.
mm,
And we were civil. I was his mom. He was always super respectful, but there is a whole new um, aspect of our relationship that started last year because of the work that I did on my own body. And I had no idea how much my son had been affected by the dinner table that I grew up at. And I started doing my work, and something so different has shown up. My son is now sitting at the dinner table. He's developed a spirituality that I never thought he would have. And so when you think that it can't shift by just starting with you, be the change that you want to see in the world, it really does begin with us. And the size of a mustard seed, right, Lily?
mhm. Yeah.
It's so tiny. It's so tiny. That's all you need. And when you put that little effort, it can be very blessed. And God can use all of that to do that.
It's so important that we make a decision today to look at what we want as opposed to what we perceive we have. And so whenever, because those perceptions can create traumas too.
Mhm.
It may not be even be real. It's just a perception. And Max Planck, and I love this expression. I heard it from Wayne Dyer many, many years ago. But when I heard it, it really spoke to me. And I use it all the time. I use it in my workshops. I use it in the classroom. That when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When I heard that for the first time, it really just resonated with me. And I realized that I could torture myself just
Mhm.
by looking at what I don't have because it's all perception. And but if I shift that to look at what I want to create in my life, then all of a sudden I realize that I'm the change. I need to be the change, not create change in everybody else, but when I create my own change, the world changes because my perception changes, my life changes. And so I don't know if you know this, but this is my new and improved model of what I've always worn. But this is my bracelet that was made for me. It says "Be the change." I don't know if you can see it
Oh,
there.
I can, and I
Yeah.
saw it in one of your posts, and I thought, that is so beautiful. I love
Yeah, somebody engraved that for me, and I did a little thank you for them in their website. I'm trying to remember their names, but the thing is that I always thought that the way I was going to create my world was to change the people around me, help them grow. When I started doing the classroom, that dynamic changed. That idea was not real. It was an illusion. And then that's when I realized I've got to change. I get to change so that I start creating what I do want. So, what are some of those steps for people that want something different, but still are focusing on what they don't have as opposed to what they want to create?
So really getting into gratitude, because when you change from I want to thank you for what I have, for who I am, including, and we've been talking, but it's like that we're made in the image and likeness of God. And that doesn't mean after I've done all my work. It means in this process, I am divinely created, and that we carry all of that devaluation of our ancestors. And we really do think that it's just us. So when we say thank you to myself just for being today, I'm a human being, not a human doing. And all I have to do is be and show up. Recently, I had a beautiful story about a guy who'd been struggling with depression his entire life, and he got a bunch of thank you or birthday wishes on his birthday. And he was so blown away. He's like, I don't even know 130 people, And so he wrote this beautiful thank you. And he said about how much he has struggled with depression, and that he started to focus on gratitude and how it really had changed him, and that he's not depressed, and he knows he has tools. He might have depression, a day here, a day there, but he knows I have tools that I can use to help me through this process. And so he said there, he looked on Facebook and the metrics on Facebook, and he realized that 2,300 people had seen that post.
Wow.
He was so, like, just his heart was so touched that he said, I wasn't even trying. And I said, exactly. You don't have to try. You just have to show up. It's who you are. Every single person is different and unique. And we transform by just embracing that.
I want to say something, and what stood out was the fact of the word depression stood out there. I just want to go deeper into this word depression. Doesn't anybody get sad anymore? I mean, it's just that we all have emotions, but is it okay to just be sad? And instead of using the clinical term depression, I'm not saying that that person doesn't need it, but I'm just saying that the word depression came out, stood out when you were saying that. And I'm not talking about the individual, but I'm just saying, how can we take this word kind of even out of our vocabulary and say, it's okay to be sad. Give ourselves a day to be sad if we want to give our day some time to be sad, but set that timer and say, okay, I'm going to be, I'm going to give myself that time, that grace to just be sad and kind of maybe dig it and just find out what is making me sad and how I can change it. I mean, is that something that makes sense to you? I mean, does it
It does, because we have many, many, many different emotions
mhm.
throughout the day. And so you're right that it's really okay. We also say it's never too late to have a happy childhood. And so when you change the perspective, you change everything, like you were saying. And so it's true. There is clinical depression that, and so people have, but what I would say that somebody that has been diagnosed with that, instead of using it as a secondary gain and saying, oh, well, there's nothing that I can do for it, realize that in our world, we say that there's a key word is frustration, and that depression happens because we're frustrated in our territory and we're not marking our boundaries. We're not speaking our truth. We're allowing people to walk all over us. So that's what I would say about depression. And so, but you're right about the sadness, and that we have a right, and it's really okay. I'm really sad about this, this experience,
Mhm.
to allow ourselves to actually feel it, because you're right. We try very much many times to just brush it. Oh, keep a stiff upper lip.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't, like, I didn't shed one tear for that. It's like, really? Well, maybe you need to go back and shed some tears about that. And it's really okay. And then it doesn't go into your body. You're
Hmm.
really expressing it, and you're honoring whatever you're feeling. We have anger. It's okay to honor it. It's just don't get stuck there.
Hmm. So, how do you recommend people to get unstuck?
Well, first, breathe. Second, the awareness leads the way. So if any area of your life that there is not peace, that is the invitation. So taking some steps and, like just showing up in the classroom and seeing there's so many tools that you offer every single day. And that is a way to start to show up one day at a time, and breathe and smile and thank yourself for what you're doing. You're amazing.
You're talking about me or the person who's saying?
Everyone, everyone. Yes,
Look at
you're
me.
amazing, and I love
You're
you.
amazing. You're amazing. Okay, so let's talk about lasting change because many times people have an awareness and they get really excited about it and then they fall back into their old habits. We have this comfort level and we stop trying. So what is your advice to someone who wants to create lasting change?
Well, in recall healing, the work that we do is lasting. It's wonderful because you're getting to the root. You're not just looking at the tip of the iceberg. Whatever is going on is the tip of the iceberg. And there's a lot underneath the waterline, and that just doesn't go away by itself. And so we have to honor each and every experience that we have. And so if we fall back, and then we're reminded, wait a minute, this is showing up again. And so every day is a new day.
Mhm.
So we just continue to get back up and start and breathe and do it again.
I think that's pretty fair. So as we enter 2025, what are some quick tips that you would like to share that will create awareness, mindfulness, whatever it is that you want to share to give us that blessing and wisdom from Dr. Michelle?
So I would say, first of all, I hope this is the best year that you've had so far. And I would also say that anything that shows up like a pebble in your shoe, you want to address it so it never has to go into the body, and that you give it honor and you use that as a launching pad to keep going and keep growing.
That's beautiful. Well, I wish you a very, very, very happy 2025. And I am looking forward to having you more than just once a year in the classroom. I just know that we recycle so many of your classes, and I want to encourage all of you to go to Soul Tree Transformations, check out some of Dr. Michelle's workshops. And are you doing one-on-one coaching? Do you do one-on-one coaching with people?
I do one-on-one coaching, and I also have facilitators in a few areas that have graduated, and so that's kind of cool. And then I also have another practitioner that works with me, or a facilitator that works with me, and so it's great. So yes, to one-on-one, and there's other people as well.
And I'm looking forward to getting that book. Once you get that book published, I am looking forward to having you back to discuss it. How about that?
Oh, I would love that. I would love
Okay,
that. And
it's
I
a
love our
date.
time together. And thank you for repeating the times. We always
Yeah.
have a great time together. So
I
thank you.
know, I know. There's so many deep takeaways here today, and I really want all of you, and I'm challenging all of you to really take some time to just sit, journal, allow whatever is going to happen, and look at it with love and honor. I love the word honor that you used today. For some reason, that word also resonated in my heart today. So let's continue to honor ourselves as opposed to shaming and blaming and guilting and comparing with other people. There's no need for that. You
Mhm.
are unique you, and that's all that matters. Just continue to draw strength from our creator, the one that created you, and co-create the life that you want. Um, uh, and start today. So thank you so much, Dr. Michelle. I really do enjoy every time you come into the classroom, and even when you're not in the classroom and we get to have our time together. So thank you so much for being such a beautiful soul and creating so much transformations in the world. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Oh,
It's really wonderful.
thank you. And please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. This is Lily McDermott and Dr. Michelle LaMasa-Dawson wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. Good
Ever.
job. That's the best ever of the year. I'm telling you right now.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking any steps to improve your life.